Denotation and connotation have been the cause of countless disagreements in tabletop role-playing games since the hobby began. The games are built on rules, and rules require interpretations. Depending on the game, its histories and lineage bring context and subtext to the words of the rulebook, color, and nuance. However, as the hobby grows, that connotation builds independent of the rules. Every table adds more lore, twists, and iterations onto the core production. Online communities spread what was once private throughout the hobby. Players bring subtext and implied meanings to the table that had longer to form than most of them have actually played. Ideas twist and mutate to maintain life within our minds, and the best go viral. What was once a notion becomes axiomatic. A meme that reflects 1,000 personal experiences can't be wrong. It's what my character would do. Used as a means of defense to separate a player from their character's actions, it's what my character would do has become a flag to spot toxic behavior at a table. The phrase arises after a questionable character behavior as a defense. Whether it is stealing from another party member, killing an innocent NPC, or lying to another player character to get them to do something they otherwise would immediately stop. This now infamous phrase is used as a defense to save the player from social backlash from the others at the table, using their character as a scapegoat for their own intentions. Just as "it's what my character would do" has become a meme, the response to it has been equally invigorated. You chose to make the character that way. However substantiated by anecdotes and experience, the core phrasing of "it's what my character would do" is itself loaded with connotation. The words themselves make no mention of a wrongdoing. By denotation, "it's what my character would do" sounds like the motto of a great roleplayer. In practice, the connotation makes the phrase feel gross. When a player is innocently questioned why they did something or where inspiration for a character moment came from, letting those words come out of your mouth feels almost like giving a Nuremberg defense. Even when nothing was done wrong and someone was just curious about a story beat or a suboptimal choice, the words feel damning after seeing how it has played out in the past. Recently, I provided a party of 4 adventurers with a drastically underpowered encounter. While on the road traveling to a monastery, the party came upon a wrecked ship along a shore and went to investigate. Getting too close, the troglodyte inhabitants and guards made themselves seen and tried to intimidate the party away. One character read the situation and backed off. The barbarian moved in to interpose himself between the threat and his allies. Getting too close, the troglodytes lashed out trying to drive the barbarian away, but that only caused the battle to ignite. The barbarian raged. The archer refused to leave his friend to fight alone. The individual already retreating saw no threat to their allies, and the final party member stayed ready to help if needed, but otherwise didn't get involved. In the end, it was still a massacre. And to some extent, every player had the words on their lips, but everyone felt like the explanation was gross. No one blamed each other. Everyone openly stated that the encounter was a lot of fun and interesting to see play out. To have a situation where doing what their character would do all added to the story without compromising themselves or endangering party members. But to say, "it's what my character would do," just felt gross. I heard it in the barbarian player's voice when it was said. I heard it in the other players when they excused him, as if responding to a guilty confessional. In the proper situation, the denotative idea is wonderful. It is everything else that those words bring with them that are the problem. Except, even denotation brings its own dangers. The connotation is built from an outward defense. It is interpersonal. "It's what my character would do" is stated to others and meant to influence how others interact with you. The words are about the character, but the interaction and the end goal is all about the players. When taken purely denotatively, the phrase is between the player and the character. The denotation is intrapersonal, within the self of the speaker. It's what my character would do becomes a frame to be worked within. Establishing how a character acts and what motivates them is a key part of role-playing. Whether it is structured with D&D 5e's traits, bonds, and flaws, Call of Cthulhu's backstory connections, or a series of descriptor tags, finding ways to act in the character's interests rather than your own is what allows a player to inhabit the mind of another person. Great players find ways to craft their characters to be able to do this in non-destructive and non-toxic ways. Occasionally, though, this comes into conflict with the second part of the hobby, which is the game part of role-playing games. Sometimes we can get so into following the character's mindset that doing so can go so far as to remove the character from the game. I want to be very clear here. I am not arguing against characters finding themselves in situations that take them away from the party. Those stories can be interesting, complex, and quite fitting in the right situation. However, other times the main thing they do is lead to a player having less fun at the table. While it may feel right for the character, it's what my character would do may be less fun for the player. Over the last few months, I've had 2 of these situations come up. More recently, a situation of it's what my character would do impeding a player's own fun was openly stated. The party has been out on a desert expedition looking for an ancient lost city. They have 3 non-combat NPCs with them, 1 sage and 2 vehicle operators. After an early morning raid from a threat originating from the lost city, the paladin reconfirmed their promise to defend the trio and not leave them undefended in hostile terrain. With the party approaching the center of this threat and their major destination, the sage was of the mindset to have the party move ahead to secure the location before they came in to work. With the paladin's promise made, there was no way she was going to immediately flip on it. She said she would stay back to defend while the others continued ahead. The player quickly added over the table that this isn't what I want to do, this is what the character wants to do. With the acknowledged dissonance between player and character desires, it is my job to reconcile those two into a single unit if possible. Luckily for me, the sage has a heavily military background and could press strategic points on why removing the keystone support from the party was worse for everyone. This wasn't an in-character argument, but a third-person, they make these arguments for you to go ahead. In short, it was permission. While the paladin had their wishes, the overall situation facilitated the player's desires. It was an acknowledgement of what the character wanted to do, with some in-world explanations giving the player permission to do what they preferred. I don't want to make this seem like the player did it to themselves. I obviously established the danger and the NPC's inability to fight. This is just how it played out. In this case, both the dissonance and the dreaded phrase were stated. In my next example, the phrase wasn't so clearly put out there. This was actually the initial spark that got me thinking on the subject for the past few months. For my recent custom D&D games, I have been including the brainstorming process for the first session in the session 0. This includes the general adventure hook as well as how the characters are transitioning from backstory into game story. While it dispels some of the theatrical smoke and mirrors, letting the players know whether they will be starting with a monster hunt or a fetch quest can help them transition into new mechanics and worry more about establishing PC connections than trying to figure out the goal of their first quest. Openly talking about how the party will group up can help manage why all the characters are coming together. For this example, our characters were coming together into a port town for a monster hunting job. 2 of them were already established monster hunters. One was abducted by pirates, and when the pirates were taken into custody, so was their enslaved worker. Finally, our PC of note was an autonome, kinda like a Warforged, that was a bosun and repairman for a ship in port. In-world, there was a gnomish artificer pirate with a mechanical ship, and the port guards took the autonome Xanstar in a wrongful identification. The monster hunters would come for the job. The two from the ships would be attempting to better their position in the city and establish themselves with good credit. Before leaving on their quest, Xanstar returned to their ship to explain the situation, and the captain agreed to stay in port longer to give the autonome time to better their reputation and give them time to earn money for the monster hunt to financially buffer the ship due to the delay. The first mate had a heart-to-heart with Xanstar about the people they would be working with and assuring them that they were a person and not a tool, no matter how the officials treated them. The first mate would keep the ship in port as long as he responsibly could. Xanstar left on their quest with the player expecting the ship to be gone when they returned. But the ship was still there. The party had found evidence of a conspiracy, and Xanstar requested more time. Despite the ship getting dragged into danger, a cross-campaign shared world event happening, and the party eventually getting to the bottom of the conspiracy, the first mate kept his word and maintained for Xanstar. When the time came to head out, Xanstar said their goodbyes to the party, and the player privately sent me his new character because this one was leaving. It was only after the goodbyes that the first mate pulled Xanstar to the side again for another heart-to-heart. This one was again about being a person and not a tool, but in the context of hiding away on the ship. Xanstar got to the ship from a past trouble and never left. Here, they have found another group that could benefit from their capabilities in exchange for getting out into the world. The private link to the second character sheet just as quietly disappeared. After the game, everyone kinda had this moment of not believing a PC was already being sunset, but accepting it for that final twist to flip all again. The player of Xanstar candidly said, "I didn't know that was an option," in response to a peaceful transition. The character had a set of relations and responsibilities, and the player was expecting me to tear them away. But I was given a backstory without immediate trauma, and I felt no need to put it there. Both of these players were honest in how they portrayed their characters. However, being fully true to a character isn't always the most optimal for game participation. I suppose that's where Game Master's role of player advocate comes in. Most often, this role is depicted as managing interactions interpersonally. Limiting the advocacy to just interpersonal ignores half of the personalities at the table. Having players so dedicated to their characters as people rather than stat blocks is fantastic. I don't want this to seem like a complaint. If a player truly believes their character should move on from a party, I want them to tell that story. What I don't want is for them to feel like they are being backed into a corner with that as the only logical escape. As a professional GM, I want my players to be as connected to the story as possible, but never at the expense of their fair share of playtime. In the end, the story is about the characters, but it is for the players. Hearing the phrase, "what my character would do," is a flag for me, but not necessarily a red flag. Just something that tells me I need to pay special attention. Green flags are players cluing me into something for the future. Yellow flags are players themselves checking in with the table, making sure they aren't crossing boundaries. Red flags of possible problems are the most feared, but the white flags of the player surrendering to the character are the ones I have to have the most care for. This is my SendingKenku. Find people who are comfortable with you. Don't listen to undesired instructions of who you are supposed to be, especially if you are giving them.